Sensory details include sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Writers employ the five senses to engage a reader's interest. If you want your writing to jump off the page, then bring your reader into the world you are creating. When describing a past event, try and remember what you saw, heard, touched, smelled, and tasted. Then incorporate that into your writing. Sensory details are used in any great story, literary or not. Think about your favorite movie or video game. What types of sounds and images are used? What do your favorite characters taste, smell, and touch? Without sensory details, stories would fail to come to life. When sensory details are used, your readers can personally experience whatever you're trying to describe, reminding them of their own experiences, giving your writing a universal feel. A universal quality is conveyed when the writer is able to personally connect with the readers. Another note about sensory details. There is no one sense that's more important than another. It all depends on the scene you're trying to create. However, imagery, the sight sense, is a common feature in vivid writing. Let's look at sensory details in action. Compare the following two passages describing a trip to the grocery store. Here's a passage without sensory details. I went to the store and bought some flowers. Then I headed to the meat department. Later, I realized I forgot to buy bread. Now, does this pull you in? Of course it doesn't. There's nothing to bring you into the writer's world. Read this revised version with the addition of sensory details. Upon entering the grocery store, I headed directly for the flower department, where I spotted yellow tulips. As I tenderly rested the tulips in my rusty shopping cart, I caught a whiff of minty dried eucalyptus. So, I added the fragrant forest green bouquet of eucalyptus to my cart. While heading for the meat department, I smelled the stench of seafood, which made my appetite disappear. I absently grabbed a bloody red hunk of New York strip and tossed it into my cart. Pushing my creaky shopping cart to the checkout line, I heard an employee announce over the PA that there was a special on shrimp. On the ride home, I realized I had forgotten to buy the crusty wheat bread I like so much. See how the extra details made the scene come to life? It takes time and effort to incorporate sensory details, but once you get the hang of it, your writing will pop. Pay close attention to how sensory details, in particular imagery, contribute to this passage from Maya Angelou's vividly powerful short story, My First Lifeline. Here, Angelou's young narrator, the speaker who tells the story, is describing her impression of Mrs. Flowers. For nearly a year, I sopped around the house, the store, the school, and the church, like an old biscuit, dirty and inedible. Then I met, or rather got to know, the lady who threw me my first lifeline. Mrs. Bertha Flowers was the aristocrat of black stamps. She had the grace of control to appear warm in the coldest weather. And on the Arkansas summer days, it seemed she had a private breeze which swirled around, cooling her. She was thin without the taut look of wiry people, and her printed voile dresses and flowered hats were as right for her as denim overalls for a farmer. Her skin was a rich black that would have peeled like a plum if snagged, but then no one would have thought of getting close enough to Mrs. Flowers to ruffle her dress, let alone snag her skin. She didn't encourage familiarity. She wore gloves, too. In this passage, we are introduced to the narrator's first lifeline. Rather than Angelou's narrator merely saying Mrs. Flowers seemed glamorous, sensory details are used throughout the passage to show us how the speaker felt about Mrs. Flowers. Angelou's description of Mrs. Flowers is enhanced by visual images that include references such as her rich black skin. These vivid descriptions also include mention of Mrs. Flowers' gloves and flowered hats. These details show the reader how glamorous Mrs. Flowers seemed to Angelou's young narrator. Here are some details to remember from this lesson. Sensory details include sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Sensory details engage the reader's interest and should be incorporated to add more depth to your writing. Imagery is the sight sense. A narrator is the speaker in a story. Writing is universal when it can personally connect to readers.